Yes, sorry. It's started right now.
Okay, we're ready to go.
All right, excellent. It is 12:03 and it is Monday, July 8th, 2024. We're convening the regular scheduled meeting of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. Board members in attendance, Holly Grushner, Brian Otley, Laura Sibilia, and myself. We expect Dan Nelson, but he has not arrived yet.
Yeah,
Christine, will
Dan's
you-
on vacation apparently. Heron just texted. So
Okay. So he's not joining us.
no, he's not joining us.
Okay. You want to do a roll call for staff?
Yeah, we have Rob Fish, Alexi Montserrat, Ginny Reboyne, Lucy Fortier, Heron Herzog, Tony Clitheroe, sorry, and Alyssa Matthews and Brittany Watson should be joining us shortly.
Okay, excellent. Next on our things to do is approval of the agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as provided. Is there a second? And then we'll hold discussion.
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Any discussion of the agenda? Any changes?
Patty, I had sent you and Christine an agenda item. I don't know that it made it in time for this agenda, but I do hope we might be able to talk about the location of trainings for the VCBB.
Yeah, let's, why don't we add that right after item 1? So let's take that up before approval of minutes, because I think that'll be a quick one, Laura.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So that'll be 1.1, location of meetings. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, let's take action. All those in favor of the agenda with a modification to add item 1.1, location of meetings, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry 4-0. All right, let's move now to location of meetings. And Laura, do you want to tee it up or?
Sure. Yes, thank you. So I know that we are working on broadband connectivity, and we're working with a bunch of folks that are working on broadband connectivity. We are also working, our staff are working on a pretty big federal program, BEAD, which is also bringing together maybe some newer partners. And so it may be our partners may make different calculations about whether or not being remote or in person is in their best interest, given kind of the expanded pool of folks who are eligible for BEAD funding. And so my request would be that meetings, trainings, et cetera, be held in a central location. Central is really the best way I've seen it is in Randolph. But I certainly would accept Montpelier, which is right off the highway and has a number of well-connected rooms that would allow for digital participation. I know we've had some meetings at some great locations up in Chittenden County. And as I've noted before, for folks coming from Southern Vermont, the Pownell, Reedsboro area, that is potentially a 7-hour round trip. For folks using e-vehicles, that still could be a challenge in a day. So I would like to see us ask staff to hold those meetings in more central locations and avoid trainings in one neck of the woods or the other. Thanks.
Okay. Christine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that at all. You know, we're our next training is scheduled for the 19th. I'm not sure if we can move that, but we will look. We schedule that. We actually have people who are flying in from out of state. So that's, that we've got a hotel that has a shuttle right off the highway, but we will definitely look into that. I just didn't even think about it, Laura. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Christine. And also, trying to be helpful for consultants or others who may be coming in from away. But really, we have to remember this is a community broadband effort. And so I think our first priority has to be being accessible to all of our communities, even more so than our guests. So if possible to move on the 19th, I would really appreciate it. I certainly understand if it's not possible, but going
Yep, you
forward,
got-
that'd be great. Thank you.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. And certainly, I think the Montpelier location is an appropriate location for us to push to for trainings or meetings, because it can handle the attendance via virtual aspect. So yeah, I would look for using state facilities to help us out, and Montpelier is fairly central.
Great.
Okay. All right. Anything else on location of meetings?
Now, I should add that Christina Sweet is with us too from staff, just to note that she's actually on a remote, on with another person, so.
Okay. All right, great. We'll let the minutes reflect that. Let's now move on to item 2, which is approval of the June 10th, 2024 meeting minutes. I'll make a motion to approve them as provided. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Holly?
Yeah. Yeah, there are so many to-dos in these minutes, and so I'm wondering if we could get a rundown on the status of some of these to-dos, which were really imminent, like the notice to eligible providers of the match, and the request by July 1st of a show of interest and so on, unless it's addressed someplace else in the agenda. But to my eye, the biggest issue is in the motion that occurs on page 6. And it is part 3A that is, I'm allegedly the author of this motion, so isn't it interesting that I'm confused by the statement that one of the criteria is that there has to be a commitment to complete construction of eligible addresses that will equal or exceed the 25% match. I think what we're going for here, is everybody caught up with me about where we're at?
Yeah. Mhm.
I
Yes.
don't
Actually,
think
I'm
we
not-
wanted.
Oh.
So
What-
I think it's about the amount of money to build the eligible addresses, but I don't think we want a commitment for the 25% match. I think we want a commitment for 100% so that you get the 25% match. We're trying to ensure that the grantee is going to build it, including the 25% match. So I just think that there's it was a tough motion to structure, and I think we may have missed something, but I'm looking to the collective wisdom here.
Holly,
Pardon?
where are you in the minutes? What's the PDF page?
Page 6.
Top of page
Page-
6. Yep. Bottom of page 5,
Okay.
top of page 6.
Yeah, and it's the motion, and I'm focused on what is enumerated as the conditions in this motion, and there's a 3A that, to my eye, doesn't quite make sense. Should I explain again, or you would just want a moment to focus?
Moment, please.
Yeah, just want to read it.
I'm ready.
Okay, so what would you like to change it to, Holly?
Well,
Ki-
I think we need a commitment to complete construction of eligible addresses that will equal or exceed the additional construction amount of the 25% match would be one way to word it. So here's the problem. It looks like the only thing someone would have to do is do construction equal to the 25%. But we're actually looking for a commitment that equals 100%, including the 25%. Who could word this better than we're wording it today? Or is this just navel gazing on my part?
So these are, let me just, can I repeat what I think it says? So, these are match grants that were awarded by the legislature and are eligible for anyone who's eligible for X 71 funding. And the grant awards will be 25% of the estimated cost projected by third party to complete construction of unfunded eligible addresses. And awards are given to eligible providers that demonstrate that they have or they will apply for BEAD for construction or another federal program to complete or support the completion of all eligible addresses in the Universal Service Plan, comma, maybe, that will equal or exceed the 25% match award. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a little funky. But it is, I do recall that we spent a lot of time and we read this, and so I don't know if correcting the minutes is the proper thing to do here, as opposed to maybe taking some other motion.
Well, we
Right,
might
'cause we-
restructure the motion, but you can, I'm glad that I'm not the only one that is scratching my head saying this as a standard for awarding grants is murky at best.
Well, I mean, so I think it's the wording that's murky, and
Yeah, no.
Patty, I see that
exactly.
Rob Fish has his hand up, and he actually was working us through this, so maybe he can help us untangle this.
Yeah, Rob, you want to take a shot at it?
But first unmute.
Thank you. One day I'll figure that out. What I might suggest that would make this clearer is just removing in that section 3A, everything after Universal Service Plan. Because reading that back, that doesn't make much sense to me either, and it seems extraneous. Like the amount of money that we're going to be able to provide is 25% of the amount of the Universal Service Plan. We already say that up in 2. The commitment is that they're applying for a grant to complete the rest of the addresses in the Universal Service Plan. So that might be the simplest way to fix that.
I think that makes sense to me. I don't know. What do you think, Holly?
Sounding better. Yeah, I mean,
So
the thing, have we
I'm gonna-
tied the Universal Service Plan to the grant adequately then? Because, you know, I'm just looking quickly. Patty, did you want to inject something there?
I wanted to ask Tony rules of etiquette here because, as Laura said, or somebody said, we put this up on the board and voted on it. So this actually may be what we voted on. And what are the requirements to change this after a vote?
Well,
So
I
we
guess,
may take action.
yes, well, I mean, the board could re-vote on modified language. However, I'm thinking that what might make the most sense is for staff to redraft it and submit it, resubmit it, and then for the board to vote on it again. So, I mean, we could take a few minutes break and just redraft it and submit it if that works for you, Patty, or we could go, you know, my only concern with Rob's proposed modification is that some questions that have come up subsequent to that raise other questions for me. So
Do we have to
Wait a
have this
second.
motion in place in July?
Just,
Rob's got his hand up.
yeah.
Or can we ask staff to take it back to the factory and vote on it in August? Because, you know, I'm not a big fan of this hyperventilating while we're trying to perfect what is a very important piece of work.
Well, so I would just note that we did take action last month, and I believe there is some urgency. I would like to hear from the CUDs around this, since they are the ones that are eligible. And so, I mean, I think the flaw here is ours. And so if we're clear on what the correction is that's necessary, I would be very happy in the background during the meeting if we were able to push this towards the table, move over it until the end of the, or not move over it. These are the minutes. So we'd have to, I mean, this is what we did, but revisit this notion at the end of the agenda, Patty.
Well, can I say something on that?
Go ahead, Holly.
We're asking Tony to redraft it, and Tony's got an important role in this meeting, so she can't be two places at once. So that's what I'm concerned about now. If, you know, if this works, I just think that what the commitment is to build all the eligible addresses in the universal service plan, and I'm not sure that the Fish Amendment addresses that, and we want to get it right this time. So I'm just looking at it that way. And then Tony says there's other issues that have come up since. So that's why I'm thinking, you know, if you want to take time out, fine. If you want to wait
Yeah.
till after Tony's presentation and take time out, fine.
Yeah, I don't think we can take time out of the meeting. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't pause the meeting. But can we take action to clear up the motion at the August meeting and not run into any issues here? Do we have any timeline issues? Christine or Rob?
Well, I think we're going to present the match to you, the match formula in executive session. This is really around, you know, how do we come up with a match? So subject to check. I think we're, you just want to get your goal is to get it worded as proper as you can, but at the same time, we understand the intent.
Right. I think the intent is clear. It's just some wording in the language
Right.
that needs to be cleaned. That's my opinion. Holly, do you agree, or?
I think the intent is clear, but you never know that until you run into it not being clear. And the thing that we're going to do in executive session is about how we're measuring the cost and for the eligible addresses that aren't addressed yet. So that actually has no bearing on this, which formulates the grant award standard. So all that being considered, I could believe that you understand what the intent is, that, there has to be a commitment to build out all the eligible addresses in the universal service plan, including using the 25%, all of it. 25% of what? 25% of the cost of building out the remaining eligible addresses. It's a long and wordy thing.
So Patty,
I'd like to see happen is have Holly and Tony sit down and redraft this motion, and then we take action on it at the next meeting.
so I would like to see us, I would like to hear from the CUDs, because this is our motion that we worked on
Yep.
at the last meeting. We own this. And so, we put this into motion and set expectations. So if the CUDs are thumbs up to August, that's great. If they're not, I'd like to see us take a pause at today's meeting and correct this.
And
Because
Laura, if I
we
could
did
just say,
this.
these are all eligible providers. It's not just the CUDs.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It's Act 71 eligible
Eligible.
providers.
Correct.
Yes.
So what we'll do is we'll work with, of course, staff we'll review this together. And come back to you with a proposal.
But I think
Then I would
Laura's
like to hear from CUDs.
Laura's comment,
today.
exactly.
And you'd like to hear from CUDs. So I think what you hear from an action item is staff will come up with a recommendation. review it with the CUDs and come back to the board? Does that work?
No,
No.
no.
No, I would like
No.
to hear from the CUDs today. If it's basically, if there's no big urgent, sirens, anything that's gonna go off, if we move this to August, which would be helpful, so that we can correct our motion. And I see Roger has his hand up, all eligible providers. If there's anything that is going to be exciting if we move this to August. If we can move it to August, great. If we can't, I'd like us to correct it today. If something is, problematic, because
Laura,
we did this.
Laura, all that said,
Yeah.
okay, this is about cleaning up the wording of our motion for
Yeah.
which we believe the intent is clear. And that's why I don't want it to go back to like a free-for-all group revision process.
I would agree with you.
Okay.
So let's just hear from the CUDs and other eligible providers if there are any challenges with pushing this off to August.
All right,
If we
well,
might.
Let's open up public comment on this issue. So anybody from the public like to respond to this piece in the agenda, to the minutes? Focus it on this item specifically.
Yep, we have four hands up, so we'll take them in order. Roger, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This is Roger. I think we're all as CUDs pretty sure of the intent of this and what the 25% used for. And at least for me, I don't see a timing issue with this, just so long as we do find out what our amounts are that will be allocated to us. And that's all.
Okay.
Thanks, Roger. Ellie, go ahead.
Sorry for not having my camera on. I'm having bandwidth issues today. So I agree with what Roger said. I think, though, the timing is important because we're all trying to pull together our budgets and understand how much funding and financing we need. And so having a month delay would be a delay in understanding what amount of budget is that we need to be getting funding for. And looking at the proposed time frame that was in the board pack, I feel like that's cutting it a little bit tight. So from my perspective, at least, it would be helpful to have that done sooner than later. Thank you.
Can I ask Ellie a question?
Go ahead, Holly.
Ellie, when you're looking at, I'm focused on what Roger said, when you're looking at creating that budget, isn't it that the model of what it's going to cost you is what's essential? You know, it's 25% of that model.
Well, so a couple of things. The first thing is exactly as you said, we need to understand what it's actually going to cost us to build out to the addresses that need to be built, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is there's $30 million that was allocated.
And that we're going to address today. The model.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Oh, the second part is what I was getting to. So the first thing is each applicant, CUD or other, is coming up with a project budget in order to be able to submit a bid. And then the second part is, of the 30 million that was allocated, how would that be divided? I understand the goal is 25% of the budget, but in some cases it may be higher, in some cases it may be lower. What that amount is what we need to be able to figure out what the gap is.
Unfortunately, our clarification of the motion won't address that latter issue.
I'm not sure I follow why.
Well, because if the money runs out, it's up to 25%, I guess, it would be the proper way to say it. It's up to 25%. So if we don't have enough money to add 25% to everybody's build budget for the estimated cost of the remaining addresses, then you'll get an allocation of up to 25%, and the staff will make a recommendation of what that is.
Right, so that's actually a great example there. That suppose in our case the allocation is 15%. That means that additional 10% we need to get funding for, or we need to have some other source of funds.
Our change of the motion language won't give you the answer to that.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that understanding the amount that is going to come to us is necessary for our planning. So that's the timing urgency. Sorry if that part was unclear.
I'm totally with you on that. It has no bearing on the motion language.
Okay.
Okay, FX, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I have a question for, why do you think that it has no bearing on the motion language, Holly?
Because Ellie needs to translate into what the award will be. And we need to understand what the estimated construction cost is. And our language is that we need a commitment to build out the universal service, and that the award would be 25% as stated. I think it's pretty clear all of a sudden that it has to be up to 25% because 30 million might not finish it off.
So
It might
3A, okay. So 3A, which is the aspect that's in conflict right now, is around eligibility.
No.
Yes.
Well, you're going to convince me that we need to really go back to the drawing board. I thought we were just cleaning up a little bit of language here, but
Okay.
there's a lot. I think what we really need to understand are the facts and circumstances of how much of the eligible construction the 30 million will cover. If you take
I'm
all
ready
the
for,
yeah, sorry.
ready to
I don't
hear
wanna
from
get this-
others.
Yeah.
There are others, Patty, sorry.
okay.
Holly
FX,
and I are done.
All right, shall I move to FX?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead, FX.
Yeah, okay, so this $30 million was originally put up by the state to serve as matching funds toward middle mile fiber. And EC Fiber has already built a lot of what would have gone into the middle mile fiber, and would have done a lot of the core mainline build of the new towns with some of the money from this middle mile fiber grant. However, the staff is interpreting this money to be only for BEAD matches. That ARPA doesn't require a match, and therefore, even though we're ARPA eligible, we would not be eligible to get any of this money. So I'd be very happy to see this redone to make us eligible to get some fraction of this $30 million. And if that takes until August, so be it.
Okay, Ann, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to just state that this entire process, for those of us who are proceeding down the path for some BEAD funding, is an incredibly complex job for us, for other providers than CUDs, and for your own staff as you work. We all work our way through this process. So any level of uncertainty as we go forward is a hinder to all of us as we go forward. And the sooner that we can have a path that has clarity in it, the better we're all going to be off. Both your VCBB staff, your board, we CUDs, and other applicants, other eligible applicants will be. So to put this off until August, I think, is not in either the VCBB's interest or in, I will just speak for CUDs and our CUD in particular, is not in our interest. And so I'm wondering whether the simplest path is simply to untangle us from the weeds of this, put a new motion in place that specifically relates to the fact that it's clarifying this particular section of the other one, and say in that motion the simpler language that I think I heard Holly say at one point, and be done with it. I'm being a little blunt here, but I'm kind of thinking that that is a path that could unwind us from the specific details that seem to be in question here.
Okay, thank you. Janelle, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah, so time is of the essence in this process, and I think it is inherent in this complicated process that we will need clarifications as we go forward, even if we think we were clear in the first motion. My vote would be to go forward to the extent we can today, and as necessary, provide clarification on what we know we need clarification on and what we learn later we need clarification on.
Thank you, Krista.
Hi, I'd like to make two clarifications. One is that the reason the timing is important, just to take this back to Ellie's point, is that in order for us to determine the amount that we need to borrow, we need to understand the potential amount that we are going to receive in grant funds. Based on the way that the VCBB is going to do this, which we don't know, right? So based on based on any way in which the VCBB decides to do this is not necessarily reflect any given CUD's reality or estimation of what it costs, right? Like it may or it may not. That's an unknown. So if we were all in like the same universe mind meld and we all knew exactly what it was going to cost, then maybe what you were saying would be accurate, Holly, because there's sort of like a percentage. But even in that circumstance, understanding what the percentage of what you think you need is, or what you think you need to compete for BEAD is what identifies the financing. Financing is not something that you can go out and get in, a couple of weeks, right? We've all been working on this for quite a period of time, and securing financing is directly dependent on providing a business model of what you need and how you're going to get there, and understanding the grant amount is integral to that. The second point that I want to make is to FX's point, which is he said something that this was for BEAD only. It's not for BEAD only, right? It's an Act 71 eligible addresses program for match to federal funding. And that was an important part of Christine's letter to the legislature. It identified things like Reconnect and other federal programs. And so I think we need to realize that this is Act 71. I do think that there are a couple of simple clarifications inside of this motion, and I would recommend that. I mean, I'm going to try to provide one over to somebody, but I recommend that we take a couple of that we take a point in time later in the meeting to reflect, do we have any proposals on the table that clarify this in the meaning that it had in its original? Because I'm not actually even entirely convinced that this was what was actually on the screen that was read out, but I trust that that must have been, if that's what's in the minutes. So I think we need to make this decision now so that we know how much money we need to go out and borrow based on our business model.
So can I respond to that, Patty, for 1 second?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Nobody's asking you to pull rabbits out of hats. What we're trying to do is get the language right, and I'm not even sure that we understood the complexity here. And I'm still waiting to hear from Tony about what other issues have come up. I want to point out that this section sub 3, awards are given to eligible providers that each demonstrate that it has or commits to apply for federal funding of all eligible addresses in the Universal Service Plan. And I'm not sure if we meant to say this part about that equal or exceed 25% of the match award. It's a question that's raised by what is the total allotment of the construction amount required, and how will it be how will the match be divvied up? And for that, I agree with both Ellie and Krista. How are you supposed to make a plan until you have those numbers? It sounds to me like we're asking for a proof that the application for federal funding will not just be $1, it will be enough to cover 25% of the eligible addresses. And I questioned whether this is the problem. This is the problem. It's open to interpretation, and that's why it needs some work. Patty, could we hear from Tony about what other issues she would address if she were revising this?
So before we do, can I ask a question? So we're still in the just kind of reorient ourselves here. So I'm not sure what's happened. We're in the middle of approving our minutes. And so I think what is happening is we are questioning something we did at our last meeting.
And Laura, it would be perfectly appropriate in the process of approving minutes that we amend the minutes to reflect the motion we intended to make.
Right. And the difficulty is we don't have, Dan Nelson was at the meeting and he's not here today. So we're missing one of 4 of us that were here. Brian was not at the last meeting. So we've got 3 of us to carry on a dialogue about an important piece of, basically this is an important directive. I'm uncomfortable today taking action on this without having all 4 of us present, and we're basically opening up the whole thing again. So in my mind, this deserves a full board meeting, and I don't know that we're going to be able to pull that up for the next August meeting. But what we took action on is what we took action on at the last meeting. So the minutes are reflecting, I am assuming they're reflecting what we actually took action on. And if we want to change that, we got to open up this box of worms here and then sort through it and go all through it again.
And so Patty, just to kind of finish out my thought here, do Tony and Holly have like new information since this has come out that like makes this questionable? I'm just not understanding because we took a lot of time and
Yes, we
care
did.
at the last meeting. And so, is it that there's new information that makes what we did at the last meeting questionable? Or are we rethinking what we did for some other reason besides new information?
I can tell you my response to that is I have no new information. I read the words on the page and said, if I was a staff person trying to implement this, I wouldn't understand what it means.
Right, and I agree with Holly that that last phrase about the 25% adds an ambiguity. It may be that just chopping that off
As
would be
Rob has
sufficient.
suggested. Yeah.
It may be that that's sufficient. However, that's something that that probably needs a little bit of further discussion and clarification.
I don't have personal minutes from or personal notes from making this motion, but I believe that the 25% was there so that a de minimis application for federal funds wouldn't be used to qualify someone for a 25% allotment. And we're asking people to make a commitment to spend at least 25% of the estimated construction cost. That doesn't, that's a commitment being made by the applicant. That's not a commitment being made by the VCBB that you'll get 25%. Do we all understand that?
Christine, do you have any words of wisdom here to help us sort through this?
Yes, I do. I don't know whether they're words of wisdom, but I have a suggestion. And it kind of piggybacks on what Holly was saying. You know, I think the issue you hear, the concern you hear from the CUDs is they want to really know how much money they're going to get. And we're going to talk about the match formula in executive session. And, you know, the board members are all here. So when we present that formula, you know, you'll either approve or not approve the formula based on your understanding. But I do think they're separate issues. And I do think we can provide the information to the CUDs they're looking for. So we're, you know, it may be a lot clearer after our executive session of what we're trying to do with this.
So could we postpone approving this motion in the minutes until after that presentation? Would that help?
I think we should. Yeah,
At least.
let's pause on approving the minutes. At some point, we're gonna have to open this back up no matter what, so.
But Roger has his hand up too, if you.
Sorry, Patty, can you catch me up?
I'm sorry, who asked that?
Laura. My laptop died.
Oh, so what we're proposing to do is not take action on the minutes, proceed through the agenda where we get to, what item is it on the agenda, Christine? We're gonna get,
It's
Yeah.
6. It's number 6.
okay,
Yeah,
when we
thank
get
you.
to item 6, we'll discuss formula allocations. And then hopefully after that, we'll have some clarity and then we'll figure out whether we make action on revising this or whether we'll take action at that point.
Okay.
All right. There was a motion on the table to approve the minutes. There was a second. We're in discussion. And what I think we need to do is vote down the motion for approving the minutes. Okay. So all those in favor of the minutes say aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And Brian, I assume you're going to abstain.
I'm abstaining, Patty.
Okay, so that's 3 opposed. Brian's abstaining because he was not at the meeting. So the motion to approve the minutes has failed. Okay, all right, we've completed our Robert's Rules of Order on that item. And we will come back to the minutes, hopefully after item 6. All right, let's move to public comment. And I do apologize. I have to step aside for about a minute to take a phone call, but I will be sort of listening to both sides of this. So go ahead with public comment.
Okay, anybody has public comment, please raise your hand. You'll be recognized and have 3 minutes to speak. FX, go ahead.
You know, I really would like to wait for Patty to come back. I really would like Patty to hear what I have to say.
Okay, I don't know what to say to that, except,
I can go.
okay, go ahead, Krista.
So I just wanted to put some clarification on the table on some of the work around digital equity, and for those listening in the public to sort of invite them forward. There's been some misunderstanding about the CUD's development and participation in a digital equity competitive grant program for the state of Vermont. We helped fund the development and bringing together of a coalition in order to do a statewide competitive grant that could reflect the entire state on the basis of the fact that for the most part, Vermont oftentimes, because of our population in these competitive grants, really only gets one token award. And so it's important for us to work together to make sure that we get the coverage. And so it's for anyone that's thinking about doing a competitive grant for this nationwide competition of roughly $1.25 billion for digital equity. I just encourage you to reach out and communicate so that we can coordinate. And what we're looking to do is to bring together all of the different pieces. So we have parties from healthcare, from libraries, from just a number of different places. So you can reach us either myself at director@nekbroadband.org, or you can reach us through Vacuda as well. And many people have those addresses.
Thank you, Krista. FX, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to just say that the legislative history of Act 71 does not support the proposition that affordable broadband is central or paramount goal of that legislation. Those of us who participated in the development of the legislation can attest. Committee members, particularly Senate Finance Chair Ann Cummings and House E&T Chair Tim Briglin, repeatedly shunted aside discussions of affordability features, remarking, quote, "We need to focus on availability. Affordability will be dealt with later," unquote. That is why there are no affordability grant programs, only construction grant programs. For Act 71, affordability means affordable enough for customers to sustain, affordable enough to attract enough customers to sustain the network. 30 VSA 8086G specifies the legislative intent behind the construction grant program. That is the functional heart of Act 71. G, it is the intent of the General Assembly that a broadband project financed under this program demonstrates an economically sustainable business model that ultimately will be eligible for financing in the private or municipal bond market. Therefore, everything this board does needs to be tested against that well-defined objective. As a practical matter, consider EC Fiber's experience. What was broadband affordability in our 23 towns in 2008? There was no affordable broadband, period. There was only dial-up. So for our service area, the definition of affordable broadband became this: a price point where enough of the locations passed by the network would take service to make the network sustainable, which meant being able to pay back all the borrowed money we were using. That turned out to be a minimum charge of $72 for 5/5 service and an average of 6 customers per mile. We've never raised our rates since then. That defined a level of regional affordability that allowed the network to be built. Enough households found that $72 to be an affordable service option to operate and maintain the network and service the debt required to build it. By the way, affordable service option is the only mention of affordability in the construction grant section of Act 71. Was that $72 a month an affordable service option for households with, say, 40K annual income? No way. They were stuck with dial-up or eventually DSL. Was it price performance competitive with cable in the handful of towns with a few miles of cable service? No way. Instead, EC Fiber was building fixed broadband that passed every home and business on the grid. Our little locally funded on borrowed money business was solving the problem that no market operator was building any broadband to provide every on-grid home and business access in our member towns. That is the problem EC Fiber set out to solve first, and that is the problem Vermont needs to solve first, and that is the paramount goal of this board, not affordability. Build fixed broadband that passes everyone and is economically sustainable. That is the first level of affordability. That is what Act 71 is all about. Instead of spending time on a misguided and unworkable affordability policy, the board should be asking what policies it has in place to assure its construction grants are meeting the legislative intent behind them, and using its convening authority to bring together the stakeholders in government and social service agencies and among ISPs to develop a Vermont definition of broadband affordability and a method by which it might be accomplished. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Looks like we can move on to the next agenda item.
All right, let's move on to next item, which is
Bead time.
line update.
Yep, Alexi's going to take that one. Go ahead, Alexi.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. This is the timeline that is in the board packet, so hopefully you had a chance to glance at it. We are currently working through the final processes of getting all of our challenge process data correct and approved by the NTIA. This will be an important step in then allowing folks to see what the data is, so that they can, which is another critical piece for folks to begin planning. It's sort of worth noting at the top that all of this really hinges on two big NTIA approvals. One is of our challenge data, two is of our volume 2. So understanding that most of this hinges on that, you know, this is our aspirational timeline at this point. So we have here in late July, again, ideally getting these federal match program funds awarded, since, again, you'll recall that NTIA was pretty clear that we needed to have that done in advance of any part of the subrecipient program being opened. We are aiming for that to happen in late August. In between now and then, we do need to do a series of trainings around all of the different pieces of the BEAD application, so that everyone understands what it is they have to do, what that application will look like, and the rest of those pieces. It will be pretty important for us to have the VCBB's request for application public in order to do that. Again, that relies on approval of volume 2 by the NTIA. Holly, I see you have a hand up. I don't know if you want to ask now.
I can wait till you're done.
Okay. So hopefully the pre-proposal, then we're looking at late August into early September. Just a reminder that pre-proposal process is designed to help us determine what the final project areas will be. The applicants need to express an intent to participate in BEAD and can suggest adjustments to those areas at that time, which the VCBB will evaluate. And if we decide to make any changes, then that's when we would be able to do that. And so that would then leave us to ideally an early October window for the full proposals to be submitted. We're leaving that open for a little over a month. And then as of now, we're giving ourselves about a month to do that initial selection and negotiation. This is another point that it really depends on what it is we end up seeing, and how much negotiation we have to do at that point. So that's another point where the timeline could end up stretching somewhat. Once all of that is completed, we then need to create the final proposal for NTIA and then submit that. And technically, as you see, we have 365 days is the BEAD timeline. Obviously, we're working to move quite a bit more quickly than that. But that is where the line is. And then once again, we'll be waiting for NTIA to approve that in order to start getting money out the door. And questions?
Thank you, Alexi. Holly, you have a question?
I do. I don't think I heard this, but maybe I just didn't understand how it was woven in. Why are the ARPA quarterly reporting deadlines in this BEAD timeline?
Oh. Right. Once upon a time, this was a multi-use document. We just opted to leave those in there just for your awareness. If you would prefer, we can remove those. But
I just wanted to know whether there was some contingency.
Yeah. No, that's just for awareness.
Thank you.
All right, other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Laura.
So to that last one, I appreciate the distinction and also keeping them in so that we kind of have an overall sense of staff and potential applicants' timelines. Alexi, what do you anticipate will be the period of time in between when the RFP is issued and when the submission date, when it will be due?
So just to clarify, you're asking the time between when we release the RFA. We're calling it an RFA just because we have other RFPs, so we don't confuse ourselves. So the request for applications for the BEAD program, we are hoping to post that essentially as soon as Volume 2 is completed. Approved by NTIA. If we don't get that approval until we start running up into when we're looking to do our windows, we're going to need to shift all that later. So we want at least a month for people to have the RFA to be able to digest it and understand it. And so that's kind of I think that's what you were asking.
It is what I'm asking. If I could just kind of press on that a little bit. Do you want a month, or is it possible to ensure a month?
We can ensure that. That timing will be up to us.
So that's the intent.
Yeah. So the only, as I mentioned, the only real hard deadline is that 365 days that clock starts ticking once we get approval of Volume 2, that we have to have the final proposal in by. So we do have discretion, within these other elements. We are trying to balance the desire to, move as quickly as we can to get the money out, while also making sure that the applicants have adequate time to prepare.
Okay, and I guess one more question would be, do we expect, think that there will be any delays, changes, unforeseen? I shouldn't say unforeseen because I'm asking if we expect, given the upcoming election. Are we seeing anything along those lines?
There has been no guidance from NTIA on that point. I don't want to overreach my own ability to speak to that point, but this would be another the clarity around the funding so that people can plan and that we provide that reliability is another consideration that we take into account when we're building our timeline.
Okay. Great. So I think that is my question. And I think I heard 1 month at least between RFA issuance and required submission date.
Yeah. And just one to your last question. I mean, the way that, just to maybe provide some additional information, the way that the funding was structured at the federal level is such that when we have already requested the funding from the federal government, and it is already obligated to us. And so that's great. Was an element that NTIA built into that process in order to provide some of that predictability.
Great. Thanks very much, Alexi. I'm all set, Patty.
All right, thank you very much. Great questions, both Holly and Laura. Any other questions on the timeline? All right, hearing none, we are done with this item. All right, the next on our agenda, is there anything else, Christine, you want to tee up on that, or?
You are
You're
muted,
muted.
Christine.
I'm sorry. I said, no other comments. I thank Alexi for doing a great job.
All right, awesome. Let's move to the next item, which is affordability, digital equity.
Yeah, in this item, Brittany and Tony have been working very closely on this because the definition of affordability and digital equity is different than the definition of affordability and BEAD. And Tony's going to kick it off first. They both have done some research what the other states are doing. So go ahead, Tony.
Okay, well, great. So I wanted just to refer you all to the packet has a letter from the Pew folks that Brittany was able to obtain, which gives a very good overview to address the board's question raised at the June meeting with respect to what are other states doing in the wake of ACP. Without belaboring each one of those points, everything is still really preliminary. There's legislation that's been introduced but not passed, that kind of thing. I'll just basically summarize that, that what the Pew letter identified was that there were a number of states that are trying to introduce legislation, or they have introduced, they're trying to pass legislation that will essentially recreate the ACP on a state level. That's obviously something which Christine has informed the board before. It's just not something that is going to be fiscally possible in Vermont because we're looking at about a $9.3 million expense per year. But anyway, so that's something, states like Pennsylvania, New York, North Carolina have introduced that kind of legislation. Connecticut and California have focused on contractually requiring providers to provide a low-cost option. So that's one approach. And of course, ultimately, as you know from our discussion of the low-cost option, the BEAD plan from our June meeting, that there is going to be a low-cost plan of some amount, somewhere between $30 and $75 under the terms of our BEAD program. Another option, another way people have been dealing with this is to actually mandate by law that providers give a low-cost option. New York had passed this Affordable Broadband Act requiring a $15 per month plan at 25 Mbps. That seems to be holding at this time, though, there's some interesting issues with respect to the timing of that decision and the FCC's decision to begin regulating broadband again under Title II, which it did like the day after the decision came out or something. So how that's actually going to play out in the federal preemption arena remains to be seen. But so far that seems to be holding. And then the other option is, or the other option that has been explored by other states is reforming, the Lifeline program, or essentially the USF funding. So, there's no question, that both BEAD and the Digital Equity Capacity Grant, both of these pieces of legislation include, reference to affordability. However, they're both one-time funding schemes, and in order for us to actually provide the kind of subsidy that we had with ACP on a federal level, either the feds are going to have to reinstitute the ACP, or there would have to be some other bucket of money that would be available. I did want to note that, and I can pull it up on my screen, in our BEAD scoring rubric, emphasizes affordability. It gives affordability the highest number of points in the primary criteria after the minimal program BEAD outlay, which is the primary factor. But this is one of the key criterion is that an affordable option has to be provided, and that subgrantees have to demonstrate a commitment to reinvesting revenue into increasing efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't know if anybody wants me to pull that up. I'm happy to do that, but I just wanted you to know that that is also in our BEAD primary criteria. I also spoke with someone from Vernonburg to find out what they knew about what was happening in other states, and they had some other information, which is that Michigan and Arkansas are looking at using a surplus from the deployment focus of their BEAD allocation to focus it on as a non-deployment item, which is also another eligible category for spending under BEAD once all the deployment has been accomplished if there's a surplus. So that's another thing that people are looking at. And I just wanted to make sure that no one else gets confused, because I got a little confused when I read the Pew letter, because it refers to the fact that that the Digital Equity State Capacity Grant Program has funds for affordability subsidy. And in discussing this with Brittany, it's clear that that subsidy is not for like an ACP type service plan affordability subsidy, but instead is a subsidy to be directed towards the kinds of projects that Brittany is currently working hard to implement the DE plan with respect to, which are, the devices, et cetera. And I was going to turn it to Brittany at this point to elaborate on what those initiatives are, unless anybody has any questions about what I just said. And then I was going to come back and just cover the slides, which address the statutory construct for the board's affordability initiatives.
So Patty, I have a question.
Go ahead, Laura, then Holly.
So I have a number of disagreements with the slides, which talk about the law that I helped author, the intent of that law. And so should we address that prior to hearing from Brittany, or?
Let's have Brittany do her presentation first, and then let's have general discussion at the end.
Great.
Okay. Holly, do you have anything specific for Holly that she just talked about, or for Tony that she just talked about?
I'm going to wait for the slides.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the slides, and then we'll open up discussion again.
Okay. So we're not going to go to Brittany.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Whoever,
yeah.
who's in charge?
Yeah, so I was just going to give Brittany an opportunity to inform the board about what she's doing with respect to affordability. And then I would go into the slides.
All right, let's hear from Brittany, and then we'll go back to Tony.
Okay, Brittany, go ahead. I see Brittany's here, but I don't see her.
Yeah, I believe she's here via phone.
Yeah, she's here via phone. Oh.
If you're, here we go. You're muted, Brittany.
Okay, I joined on my laptop, so I'm having some connectivity issues, and I thought my phone would be better. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I'm going to have Heron share some slides that I have presented to the board at a previous board meeting. And so I'm going to share a brief update on our progress with preparing for the implementation phase. And so the implementation phase is anticipated to officially begin in September of this year after we receive our tentatively allocated 5.2 million through the capacity grant program. So as Tony shared before, for digital equity, I'm focused on the accessibility and affordability of devices, digital skilling, and technology support. And so the programs that we've identified to begin this work in bridging the digital divide reflect that. So I want to begin with our vision for digital equity. And so that's the state of Vermont seeks to ensure every individual in Vermont, regardless of identity, community, or economic challenges, has high quality, accessible, affordable technology resources. Next slide, Heron. Okay.
There it is.
So as you may recall, we have identified 5 programs and strategies to begin to achieve the goals identified in our digital equity plan and bridge the digital divide. So research to determine baselines and set benchmarks that we'll be focusing on this year, which is year 1. Subgrants to build capacity of organizations representing targeted covered populations, which we plan to launch year 2. Regional program to support access to appropriate devices, which we've also planned to launch during year 2. Development of a statewide digital navigator program that will be launched year 2 as well. And expanded workforce development program addressing digital skills. And so this is a program that is already established through the BEAD program, but we'll be implementing digital equity related initiatives during year 3. Next slide, Heron, please. So these programs and strategies address 4 out of 5 of the goals identified in the digital equity plan and will impact all covered populations. And so our focus this year is for research and outreach. So far for research, we have UVM Assistant Professor Annika Ayer has been awarded the Hatch Grant to conduct research to determine the impact technology or broadband has on Vermont communities, specifically as it relates to health outcomes. We're in process of funding Kat Mon, a UVM grad student, who will assist with research specific to incarcerated individuals, and are in process of fine-tuning details to post for a research contractor to assist with gathering the data we need and setting up systems for data gathering and analyzation. And we'll hire a data specialist that will oversee and implement data strategies related to digital equity. And so as far as outreach, we're building awareness and partnerships through outreach to maximize on existing work that's happening and to build trust and momentum for when we begin launching programs in year 2. So thank you, Heron. You can stop sharing. That's all I have. Thanks all.
Patty,
All right.
I have a question for Brittany.
Okay, go ahead.
Brittany, in a recent article published by Vermont Digger and republished in the White River Valley Herald, there's a discussion of the loss of the ACP in which it says that your digital equity program is a plan to provide reliable and affordable broadband service to all who choose to get it. And it also says that where the communication union districts are looking to scramble to fill the hole left by ACP, that the broadband board, us, is providing address the digital divide with a $5.3 million federal equity grant focused on affordability, accessibility, and digital skills. Isn't it true that that $5.3 million is really focused on, as you've said, technology and skills?
The primary focus is around technology and digital skilling for digital equity. I think
Thank
what's
you.
really important to note, though, is all of these activities and strategies and programs we're building are going to rely on Vermonters being able to afford their internet service plans, right? So there is that connection.
Thanks for making that point, that if they can't afford the connection, the skills are pretty much a loss. Thank you. It's also, I would say whoever, who, I don't know who's handling the press for these stories, but an average reader would look at these stories and say, don't worry, the ACP is gone, but the VCBB has a $5.3 million federal affordability program to fill in. That's what's implied. That is far from the facts.
That I take your point, and I think we do need to do some clarification in the press, and Heron and I will take that on.
All right, Tony, do you want to going on your part of this presentation? Tony, still with us? If you're
I'm so
speaking,
sorry. I'm so sorry. I put the mute on because there was a lot of racket going on. Okay, so yes, if we go back to the presentation that's entitled "The Board's Role with Respect to the Affordability of Broadband Service Plans." I don't want to go through and read all of these slides,
Sure
but the
you
bottom,
do.
huh?
Sure you do.
Okay, all right. All right, so to develop an accountability policy that promotes the affordability of broadband service plans, that's the board's role. And that is a distinct issue from the affordability of devices, which I think we just covered pretty well. And it's required under Act 71, and it's also consistent with BEAD. And so these slides,
I have to stop this right here. It absolutely is not a requirement of Act 71.
What is not a requirement?
Development of an affordability policy.
It's not a requirement. It's within our authority.
Those are very, very different concepts, as you know.
True, but I think we should let Tony complete her presentation.
Yes, and I'm happy to respond to that, Laura. I understand the point you're making. It's not there are different parts of Act 71, right, with respect to which indicate different legislative intent on various issues. So, for instance, the provisions of Act 71 that I've cited here in the slide, in these slides, these refer to a grant of authorization to the board to develop a policy. So that obviously indicates A, the legislature knew that this was an issue, B, the legislature knew it was an important issue, and 3, the legislature wanted to make sure the VCBB knew that they had the authority to address this issue. That's a different kind of statutory instruction than you have later on in the statute with respect to like the requirement that we develop a continuity of operation, that we develop grant terms, that are policies that concern recoupment of grant assets. There's some specific things where the board has been mandated by the legislature to develop a policy. However, the point is the legislature has authorized the VCBB to develop the affordability policy, or go to the legislature and seek seek a program to address affordability, which, that's another issue, and hopefully that's something we'll be addressing next session.
So I I'm
So
not sure what to take away from this presentation, but one
It's-
thing that feels really important to me is that we use accurate terms. And so saying that the legislature, Act 71 requires this is inaccurate.
It doesn't, she didn't say, she
It
said
says it in the
authorizes.
presentation, actually.
Okay.
I
So,
said, well, I
Tony, I
mean,
think you should complete the presentation.
okay, and I just, to address your point, Laura, I'm talking, when I say it's required under Act 71, I'm talking about the three things I just mentioned. It was identified as a concern, identified as a key concern, and specifically authorized the board to deal with it. So that's not incidental. And even though it's not mandated, I think there's an argument that overall that is something that is required under the statute. If the board, has the resources and ability to address it, it's been put on their plate. And the other things that are mentioned also are.
So I just want to be clear. I do not concur with your assessment. And I spent probably hundreds of hours working on this. So
It doesn't change the legislation.
that I wrote and the discussions that we had, many of which you all were participating in.
And that the
but-
legislature passed in its final form.
But I'm just talking about what the legislature passed, how I read the words of the statute.
So, I'm sorry to dig in here, but we have, oftentimes we have to kind of check back, staff maybe further ahead of us than we are. And so using the word required, it feels compelling in a way that the legislation is not. And so I would like us to use actually the real language. I am happy to go through and talk about the 8 or 9 instances where the word affordable or affordability appears in Act 71, and in what section and in what context, none of which is a requirement.
Right, Laura, I'm going to jump in here. I agree with that, Laura, that it's not required, but certainly the statute is enabling legislation that supports us
Yes.
taking action on developing certain policies.
Mm-hmm.
And one is consumer protection standards.
Mhm.
Another is construction standards. Another is affordability. So I think the word is enabling versus required. I think that's where
You will get zero argument from me when required is changed to empowered or there is enabling language. So
Okay.
my strong reaction is to required.
Okay.
It is not. We do
That's
not have
fine.
to have an affordability policy, period.
Okay, well, I certainly understand and respect your point of view, and I did not mean to say that the board was mandated to do an affordability policy, and I think that that's clear as you look in the later slides where I'm providing the actual text of the statute. In my
So, Patty,
opinion, yeah.
I would actually like to ask that this presentation be updated and corrected and the word required removed. This is, presentation from our attorney. And so I would not want anyone coming back and pointing to that.
I mean, Tony, do you agree with that point? It's not a requirement. The legislation provided enabling language for us to take action on certain policies. And one of those is affordability. It's not a requirement, it's enabling. And we've all talked about it for the last 3-4 years now that we need to develop this policy.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that the statute mandates it. That's not what I intended to say.
So
Okay.
this is occurring on the first slide. In the banner of the slide, it says Act 71 requirement. So I think Laura's proposing that you just strike requirement.
Oh, it's in the banner. I wasn't even looking at that. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm
That's
sorry.
the problem.
I'm sorry.
Matt,
I
should-
was not even looking at the banner that was, sorry about that.
It's in
I
the
was looking
banner.
at the prior slide where I said, you know, that where we should develop a policy. It's consistent with BEAD required under Act 71.
All right.
And I believe the
and
memo
distinct.
that we received from you, Tony, also references a requirement. So, I mean, I really would like to make sure I can go back and look at that, but I was reviewing that last night and I would like to make sure that we use very clear language, and required is not the right term.
Right. And, you know, whatever the board wants. I mean, I just want you to know my use of the word requirement was my legal opinion as to what the statute means, because the statute calls out affordability, it calls out and provides authorization to deal with affordability. And so unlike anything else under the sun, it's there for a reason. And so that's where that comes from. I did not mean to indicate that it was a mandate under the legislation. So requirement is too close to mandate for you. I'm not sure.
I see
another
your
word
point,
would be.
Tony. You're using requirement as in one of the ingredients in the menu.
Exactly.
A requirement
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
also
And
not
so-
a requirement.
and so because we cannot modify a legal opinion by fiat of the board, Tony will have to go back and decide if she can substitute that word for a less loaded word.
Yes, I'm happy to do that, but I just want you to know, Laura, I totally understand what you're saying, and I did not mean to make it sound like it was mandated.
Okay. And your memo, Tony, actually states Act 71 does not mandate that the board develop an affordability policy. However, it does characterize the development of an affordability policy or program as, and in quotes, necessary and convenient to carry out and effectuate the purposes and provisions, end quote. So
Thank
the
you,
part
and
of
that's what I
disagreement.
mean by requirement. It's a necessary ingredient, yeah.
state it
And it's
very
not.
And Laura, council's entitled to an opinion.
Maybe I would
a
suggest
measured
that
legal
council
opinion.
check in with legislative council about legislative intent. So
I don't think Tony meant that we are required to do this. She's using that word in a different capacity.
So the memo, the piece that you just read, Patty, from the memo was the piece that I actually last night read, and I said, nope, that's not actually right. And so this requirement is another piece. So I'm happy. I mean, it might be expeditious, if you'd like, for me to go through every instance of the word, or I'm happy to sit down with Tony if that would be helpful for Tony and kind of talk about what each section is doing and why the word affordable or affordability appears there, or you might reach out to legislative council and check in with them on that.
I feel comfortable with with the analysis here, but I'm happy to address your concern about requirements sounding like mandated, and I will see if I can find another word more. I'm happy to do that.
And I guess if you wanted to, you could confer with legislative council.
And so, and what I'll do is I will actually detail my concerns in a memo around all of the words of affordable, and I will send that to the board. So there we go.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, Laura, because I read Tony's memo and I also went through the statute and found every reference to affordability. And I read it in the context of those sections. And I thought her memo was very, very appropriate and squarely characterized that we have enabling legislation and we can develop policies if we so choose around affordability within the confines of the quotes that she's put in that memo.
So my recollection as an author and person who brought this forward is very close to FX's. So I'm not opposed to us developing an affordability policy. I'm not opposed to any of that. I am really interested in us being clear about what our mandate is. And in almost every case, affordability occurs after the phrase access to reliable. And so it is access, because there is none, as
To
FX pointed
reliable.
out, that was the priority. So I just want to make sure that we don't get confused about what our job is here. Okay, I'm going to mute myself, Patty. I'm a little worked up. So I will actually do as I've suggested, and I will write a memo about affordable and affordability in every place that it does. I appreciate Tony's offer to go back and revisit her words, and I would like us to correct these memos and presentations when we arrive on the correct language.
If it's warranted.
So, moving on to the next slide, I make the assertion that affordability is central to the purpose of Act 71. The express purpose of the act is to support policies and programs designed to accelerate community efforts that advance the state's goal of achieving universal access to reliable, high quality, affordable, fixed broadband, and to establish the board to coordinate, facilitate, support, and accelerate the development and implementation of universal community broadband solutions. So that's the overall purpose of the legislation, is to achieve the state's goal of providing everybody with broadband access that's good quality and that they can afford. Then Act 71 expressly empowers the board to develop policies that promote access to affordable broadband service plans. So again, this gets to where the legislature specifically calls out and authorizes and empowers the board to develop such policies. And the legislation also authorizes the board to recommend a program to promote access to affordable broadband service plans. And that is something that I'm hopefully will be able to advance next year, if possible. So Act 71 mandates that the board prioritize the affordability of broadband service plans. So there's language that says that the board must, there's the mandated language, you must prioritize broadband projects that provide customers with affordable service options. So
that's 6 out of 7.
Okay.
Priorities.
I don't know what you're talking about the list in the statute
It's an
itself.
order of prioritization. Yes, this is 6 out of 7.
Okay.
But
It is provided. It is the legislature did decide that that it was going to mandate prioritization of projects that provided affordable broadband options. So the board has structured its subgrantee selection process to emphasize the importance of affordability. This is what I was referring to before. I can share my screen briefly to show you this language. This is the affordability primary criteria under BEAD. So this obviously is directing all the applicants as to what needs to be in their BEAD proposals. And it's clear that this major item of scoring is highly dependent on providing of showing a commitment to provide the most affordable total price to the customer for 1 gigabit in the proposed project area and 124 others, both now and into the future. So it's not just, indication or commitment of doing that immediately, but also long-term. Prospective subgrantees cannot score strongly in this criterion without a demonstrated commitment to reinvest revenue into increasing efficiency and ensuring that rates remain affordable over the lifetime of the funded network or 20 years, whichever is greater. By way of example, this commitment could be demonstrated through a business structure that limits the network's profit or through a commitment to a stable or decreasing price throughout the life of the funded network or 20 years, whichever is greater. So that's a very strong statement in the BEAD program. I guess that, did you not, my screen did not share?
No, it's okay.
No, it did not share.
Sorry about that. I clicked it. But anyway, so trying to get back to my little presentation here. So yeah, so that's 40% of the total points available for the primary criteria are on that affordability piece, which I just read to you.
Tony, quickly on that 40%, where does that come from?
The 75 points are the primary, called the primary criteria. Those are, and Alexi could probably speak to that better than I, but in terms of the whole scoring rubric under BEAD, and 31 of the points are for concern the total amount of the federal government's BEAD outlay for any project. That's the most important criterion as per the NTIA. That gets 31 points, and affordability 30, and then 14 is for fair labor standards, and that makes up the first 75.
So the scoring rubric, the scoring rubric awards 40% of the total available points in the primary selection criteria based on the applicant's commitment to provide the most favorable total price to the customer. Where does that 40% number come from?
It's just the number of points. So it's 75 points in the primary criteria. 31 are for the minimal outlay.
I'm gonna have why don't Alexi, why don't you take that?
Sure. I think what you're asking is how did we arrive at that, or was it just?
Is it a BEAD directive, or did you come up with it?
So the affordability issue scoring piece is an NTIA requirement.
Okay,
our
perfect.
nuance on that was and Lucy Rogers was very careful about this when the way they were working on it was the now and into the future. So we took
It's
took
an
that part.
It's an NTIA specified number. That's all you need to. Okay, I wanted to know.
So the as you know from the last meeting, that the BEAD program additionally requires all projects provide a low cost option, which we now reduced from a $45 baseline to a $30 monthly baseline, which of course through various proofs and evidence can go up to $75 a month depending on the impacts on business plans. And with respect to middle class affordability, all projects must offer a range of service plans that vary based on speed and price, including a lower cost, lower speed tier that would be affordable to any consumer, which must be reported and are certified annually to the VCBB. And the requirement will persist over the useful life of the network or 20 years. So I guess that's that sums up the statutory context as I see it. Are there any other questions?
So in order to move us forward in a productive fashion, let's be specific on our questions. If we have disagreements in terms of the content, certainly Laura, you've expressed that you're going to put a memo together and codify your thoughts on this, and I'm happy to do it that way. But let's try to be efficient with this and not turn this into a big debate session. All right, Holly, then Brian, and then Laura.
So I just have this question for you, Tony. FX would point out 30 VSA 8086G, which is a subsection that regards the sustainability of the business model. There isn't anything that says a sustainable business model can't be include affordable rates, right?
No, and I think the implication is that that's something that would come out over time, right?
Well, it doesn't say that either,
Right.
but that's the hope, right?
Right.
And would you agree with FX that subsection 8086G is controlling to the point of being the priority over the rest of the statute?
No. Let's see. So I'm
Okay.
looking at 8086G. It's the intent of the General Assembly that a broadband project financed under the program demonstrates an economically sustainable business model that ultimately will be eligible for financing in the private and municipal bond market. I think, this primarily instructs the VCBB that, the public funding is not going to be the end all be all, that, these organizations are going to have to be sustainable and attractive to private investment as well.
Get it. So I would just like to say this to my colleagues. We've given away millions and millions and millions of dollars in the state of Vermont. And in the past, affordability hasn't been an objective, period. And there's been no controls. So I'm pretty interested in affordability, as I think you know. And I'm very interested in the sense that affordability may not be a specific number for all CUDs, but I am very concerned, like the $30 rate. There's going to be CUDs that need to argue for an affordable rate that's greater than $30. But my concern is that we've been approving grants without a deep dive into the business plan and understanding the rate structure by which we get to a sustainable business plan. And this is something that I think is a level of detail that maybe the board needs to pay more attention to. Thanks.
Okay, Brian, and then Laura.
I just wanted to say, Patty, I feel like we've exhausted the productive use of this discussion. We're kind of going in circles now, and we're not going to satisfy the range of opinions that the parties have, especially among the board members here. So in the interest of time, I think this is a worthy discussion that warrants an offline session with us to get grounded and see if we can get aligned. It's just not going to happen today.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, Laura.
You're muted.
Agreed.
All right. Any other comments that anyone wants to share at this point from the board? Or questions? All right. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, this was a lively discussion.
And it's useful.
I will.
Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. And I will check in with Christine to figure out our next steps to tee this up, to have some more dialogue around this in an appropriate fashion. Okay, let's now move on to the next agenda item. Get back to my packet.
Yeah, this is
Next item is match estimation summary.
yeah, and we're going to need to do this in executive session.
Can you hold on, Christine? Can you explain why this rises to the level for executive session?
Yeah, I'll have Tony explain that.
Patty, the reason that this is appropriate for executive session is that these numbers are confidential. They could impact bidding, and so they fall under the contract negotiation exemption under the Public Records Act and under the Open Meetings Law. Also, as a result, it's the contract negotiations exemption justifies this, Patty.
Yeah, you could, a bidder could take the numbers and anybody could take the numbers and actually backtrack and figure out what the competitive bid will be based on this. And if they know that, they can underbid. So it creates an unfair playing field in the bidding process. And, Rob's got we're going to do some public statements before we go into executive session. But when we get into the actual numbers, we're saying that that is something that should not be public because it would muddy the bidding process.
So people could game the system is what you're saying?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully I can connect more of the dots once we go into executive session, but I only want to go into executive session for the parts that must be an executive session. So we need to stay public for anything that's general.
Yeah, we're prepared to do so.
Okay.
Certainly.
Go ahead, Rob.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to give a brief update first before we go into an executive session. Letters were sent out to the eligible providers with an approved universal service plan. Responses were received. We are now taking that information, and that information will be put into the model. I do want to clarify that we did, as FX made clear, get a request from EC Fiber. The way the legislation is written, that these funds must leverage another federal program. The issue here is there is no match requirement from the feds for the ARPA funds. EC Fiber is more than welcome to apply for any of the USDA funds, EDA funds, NBRC, or any other program out there that they're qualified, and to get access to the match. This isn't only for BEAD, and I want to just make sure that that is very, very clear. In terms of creating the formula, we would like to, with the executive session, include our contractors with Stone Environmental in the meeting, and they will give a presentation of how we're adopting different models to reflect the Vermont reality.
Before we go into executive session, Patty, can we state a couple of things on the record that will help clarify our situation here?
Yes.
So, and these are framed in as questions to Rob. So Rob, I see that you took on the task of contacting all eligible providers. Can you confirm that you didn't only contact grantees?
This was all eligible providers with universal service plans that have been approved. So that was only the grantees that have been approved by the board for an Act 71 universal service plan.
Okay, well, that backfired. Okay, and so then can you tell us how many responses or requests you intentions to participate that you received?
I feel
Number.
comfortable saying the number, but not who, for the reasons we have spoken before. People can do math, I guess, too. Give me a second while I count here, unless someone has this immediately offhand. But I can say that it wasn't only the CUDs. To be clear, it was also another eligible provider. We have received 1, 2. I believe it's 5, counting quickly off the top of my head here. It's easier to say the number that haven't, but I don't want to do that at this point.
Thank you. I note that actually I'm looking at the motion as we approved it, as we passed it in our unapproved minutes. And it says the grant funds are awarded to Act 71 eligible providers. And it's really unclear how an approved universal service plan plays into that. I just want to note that.
All right, is there anything else before we go into executive session?
I also want to say I did send over to everybody, and we can display it on the screen. We can do this now or afterwards. Propose the language to revise that motion as developed by the programmatic staff.
Can we go in, I would like to take up the formula before we do anything on that motion.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to make a motion that we move into executive session per 1 VSA section 313, paragraph A1A, authorizing a public body to hold an executive session after making a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carries 4 to. All right, let's move this over to executive session. And again, who else, or Rob, you've noted who's coming in Stone?
Yes, our contractors from Stone.
Okay.
And for staff, I assume it would be Tony and Alexi, Christine, and I.
Alyssa.
Alyssa
Matthew.
too,
Alyssa.
if Alyssa's on it. Okay. Sorry, Alyssa.
Hmm.
we're all coming back now from executive session.
Yeah, I closed the meeting.
It's like we've got, we're going to take a few minutes to wait for Patty to rejoin. She was having some computer problems.
Okay,
So-
I should be on. I see some of you.
Yeah, you're on.
Great.
Okay.
Hopefully my phone doesn't heat back up again.
We're working to spotlight everybody. Please come on camera if you're coming back in. That'll help us find you. Laura, great. And then Brian is who we're looking for in the list here. There's Brian. Perfect.
All right, Tony, because I'm on time, I'll take the update once we're ready to go. Just let me know, Rob, when we're ready to go.
Oh, we're ready to go.
All right, so no action was taken in executive session, and the board has decided that we're going to follow up with a second meeting in July to go through in more detail the formula that was presented. So no action was taken, and a follow-up meeting will be scheduled in the future. All right, anything else, Christine, under the match estimation summary statement?
Nope, I think we're all set.
All right. We have, I'm just trying to think where to put in here, going back to the agenda approval and modifying the item that we discussed relative to the 25%. Is the board okay inserting that here? And Holly, I'm going to look to you because you're going to lead a lot of this with Rob. You're muted, Holly. You're muted. You're still muted, Holly.
But I'm talking a blue streak. So if you would just give us, if you could just take one more agenda item, it would give us the chance to send my comments back to Rob and Tony for review.
All right, let's go on to UCLA update.
Alyssa's going to take this. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yep. Sorry about that. So we have, it's going to be a quick update. I'm going to have Nick from Stone here to show you a few slides and show you the process. But basically, we've been collaborating with South Carolina, who has developed a way to use the UCLA speed test data to have updated performance monitoring, and this will allow us to track progress not only of our grantees, but also real time what's happening with other federally funded project areas and other unserved and underserved areas of the state. So with that, Nick, do you want to start your
Yes.
slide?
Yep. Okay. I can share, I think. Hold on. Hopefully this is the right thing. Are you seeing a slideshow, everybody? Yes? Okay, thank you. Okay, so talking about how we're going to be tracking network growth and performance using data from UCLA. So after the broadband board team saw a presentation by the South Carolina Broadband Office on how they were doing it, we got in touch with their team lead there, James Stritzinger, and he has graciously offered to lead us through how he did it and help us implement as well. So Vermont will be following their lead and using some of the same methods and processes. UCLA's data will be used to drive the dashboard showing where in Vermont people are connecting and what speed they're experiencing. This will be done as sort of a passive monitoring of the growth of the connectivity across Vermont as opposed to an active one. this approach stands in contrast to either having CUDs report the data directly to the VCPB or having the CUDs track it and then make it accessible for us to pull from them. So that in this case, we're not going to each CUD, we are going to Ookla, and they are giving us all the details on all of the connection data that's coming in, whether it's from CUDs or other ISPs, but then we'll be filtering it to just get the CUD and grantee information. So first I want to talk really quickly about Ookla if you don't know, because it's a weird name and you might be wondering what that's all about. They've been around for quite a while, running a site called speedtest.net, like for a while, I mean maybe 2 decades. And the basic premise is you go to a website, click go, and it download some data from your to your computer, and you measure the speed of the download, and then it uploads that data back to them, measures the speed of the upload, and you get a final result screen, which they can use to tell what your service quality and speed are. So that's the basic idea that speedtest.net and Ookla have been using for quite a long time. Now let's talk about how it relates to Vermont. This is not Vermont, this is South Carolina, but it's a good example of how the data maps to the ground, because I think one of the big concerns is around privacy. So there is a geospatial indexing system, geospatial meaning on the map, on the ground, indexing system that partitions the world into hexagonal cells called a hex grid. The actual term is H3 is the name of the particular schema being used, and it was developed by Uber, but it's now open source. The big advantage is that every hexagonal cell at any particular resolution of this grid, and you can see 4 resolutions drawn. Well, you can see 3 actually on the map drawn here. Each one of those cells is of an equal area, as opposed to a different approach, which might be to use, let's say, census blocks, where each census block is a different size. Or another approach that one might try to use is using some kind of grid system, pre-existing grid system, but they don't apply to the entire world or the entire US. An example would be the TRS grid system used a lot in the Midwest, but that doesn't apply as much in the East Coast. So this is a universal grid system, and we know for each grid cell roughly what size it is, where the blue hexagonal cells are approximately 8,928 acres. And although it doesn't show them, the highest resolution, resolution 9, that would be shown are 26 acre hexagons. Ookla's data is tracked pretty precisely, and this is why I think there's a lot of concern about privacy. However, they don't make it accessible in the precisely tracked location. They aggregate it into a hexagon grid level 9, resolution 9. So at best, we can't see any higher resolution than 26 acres. They don't make it available to us, and this is what they do for all the consumers. It's not a matter of paying for it. They don't share it. The team is undecided right now. The team here at the VCPB GIS team is undecided as to what precision we'll be displaying on the dashboard when we build it. It could be at resolution 9. It could be at resolution 8 to speed up processing. We haven't come to that yet. Because the data is aggregated to a hexagon grid, the grid cell will be symbolized to indicate both how many tests are represented for a grid cell as well as what speeds are being reported. And nobody looking at the map publicly would be able to know then, based on the symbology, how many households are represented by the data. If we break it up into ranges, a grid cell might tell them that there have been between 1 and 10 tests run in that grid cell, but you won't know if that was 1 household running 10 tests or 10 households running 1 test. And that's going to be pretty private, I think, for the case. If we look at a lot of locations where we think that's not private enough, we can increase the resolution, or sorry, decrease the resolution to resolution 8, and that should be very, very private. The nature of the Ookla data is it only reports when people have run a speed test, and so VCPB will work with the CUDs to push people being connected after they're connected, or not to the CUDs, but to the grantees, I should say, once they're connected to run a test. They'll probably need to run a test from a GPS enabled device, specifically like a smartphone or tablet, to get more precision. The results of the test will become visible in the dashboard on regular intervals. For South Carolina, this happens weekly. The VCBB may choose to show updates more or less frequently, although we cannot access data any more frequently than daily from Ookla. We will start with a data set showing the status of connectivity in Vermont for the last 12 months. This is a sliding window that Ookla gives us based on the data license that we have. So we can always look back 12 months. At that point, areas with no test or connectivity in Ookla's data will not appear as colored or delineated on the dashboard at all. So on the map, there'd just be the white areas, right? We will start after we start, as soon as one test is run inside a particular hexagonal grid cell, it'll show up with an orange border for the first time that we detect it. The cell will be drawn with an orange border at first, and then later, after it's had tests coming in, but it's been detected before, we'll have a black border. And then as soon as one test is run and the results of the test meet the speed criteria that we're using, we will fill in the color of the grid cell to show the color. Finally, what does the overall process look like? Basically, there's three major components. There's Ookla and providing data that we're pulling from them to an IBM cloud server, and that's where processing is being run. This cloud server configuration is something that South Carolina has arranged with IBM, and they're providing access to their entire configuration for us to replicate. Once that's done, it goes through a process of filtering, cleanup, and as the image shows, getting your ducks in a row to display it on a map. And then finally, it's repeated on intervals so that we have what effectively looks like a frequently updated dashboard. This process works pretty well, and in South Carolina, at least since January 2019, they've collected over 4.2 million speed test results, and they're getting 2,000 to 3,000 new tests daily. The VCBB has already procured access to the Ookla datasets necessary. Vermont's GIS team has held a project kickoff meeting with James Stritzinger at South Carolina. The project, as South Carolina executed it, requires use of data processing. As I mentioned, by IBM, South Carolina is giving us access to the tool, and the team at IBM that set up the tool. The VCBB GIS team has met with the IBM team and South Carolina and is pushing forward with implementing the data processing now. And contractual and logistical stuff over the summer is likely to mean that it will still take a few months before we get the whole system going as it is, but we are underway. And that is all I have to say. Are there any questions?
Okay, anybody from the board have questions? Thank you, Nick, for that presentation. And I have figured out that my phone goes into meltdown mode when my camera's on, so I'm going to be frequently shutting my visual off. Holly, go ahead.
Nick, I just want to make sure this is important information and actually very exciting, but I just want to make sure that I understand a little bit more about how this works. So the privacy issue is really driven by the competitive nature of the data, right? So that providers can't get a sense of where growth is happening that they're not participating in? Or is there other nefarious concerns that we have about privacy here that you can explain to me? And because, how will I know? And the other thing that I'm curious about here is Ookla must have figured out a way that people can't scam the system or hack the system such that an existing provider goes out there and just uploads a bunch of data to suggest that the area is already covered.
Okay. I can't speak to all of the privacy concerns. What I've heard from my discussions with VCBB staff was actually that it was more of a concern about showing individual households and protecting Vermonters' privacy, not as a business concern. But
Of where,
if it is
of whether or not they have service?
about their data being shared to a cloud service that is, I guess, maybe could be used for advertising or something along those lines.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, as it's going, it will show where there is growth happening. It will be up to us how we filter it in terms of what growth we show exactly, and that can be dialed in still. We're far from that part of the implementation.
But I understand, and maybe it's a staff person who has to understand this. I understand that this is a system that's going to show us where our grant dollars are at work, essentially, and locations are coming online. What's to prevent a grantee from going out and somehow using their cell phone to show network service? I don't know.
Right. Well, let's see. The first question of like, can somebody just upload a bunch of tests? Ookla doesn't have a method by which you submit tests. I mean, you kind of go through their app on your phone, or you go through their website. In either case, they're recording your IP address, so they know.
But not what provider you're on.
They will know what provider you're on.
Thank you.
Yes, and that is information that we have access to as well. So you'll be able to see the tests coming in and break it down by the provider. I think they do filter such that somebody couldn't, I don't know, run tests constantly over and over and over again with some kind of automation thing. But there are other questions about, like you said, how do you know if they're on a cell phone or if they're on a wireless system connected to the newly installed fiber, which will be something that we need to make sure that that's set up correctly.
Yeah, and to answer your other question, Holly, this is precisely to show us how much progress the grantees are making, right? Yes, because so you will see, but I don't see that as a competitive threat. That's actually us confirming that we're making progress.
At the moment, I know that in South Carolina, the dashboard is there for their equivalent of the broadband board for internal use, and they're still figuring out if they want to make it public. So I don't know that what their experience is with people looking at it, but I think if we're making it public, it should be pretty helpful for people to see where the money is going. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That was really helpful. The data privacy issue was an issue I brought up several meetings ago and to the consumer level. So
Right.
Ookla is not able to data mine anything by the IP address.
They are they able to data mine something by the IP address?
Other than your speed, and that's my concern, is that if I do a speed test on my laptop, are they seeing any sort of internet traffic by me allowing them into my computer?
They are not getting into your computer, so to speak. They are able to see specifically what they are doing between you and them during the speed test. So they are collecting all that information, but it's really limited to the interaction that you're having during that speed test. So they'll know your location, your speeds, and your service provider. There's also an option in the speed test process to rate your service provider after you've concluded the test, which they also have, but that's something that you are offering to them. So it's not required.
Okay. Christine, do you need action from us, or is this just
No,
a
no, no, this was an update, so
Okay.
you're good. I see Tony has her hand up too, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond, Patty, to your question. I had addressed that in the parking lot some months ago, confirming your concerns about the third-party data mining and discovering that it was unavoidable. There was nothing we could do, and that's really why Stone has the contract with Ookla. BCBB did not contract directly with Ookla.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions of Nick?
Is Holly's hand still up, or is that?
No,
No.
that's my
Oh.
fault. Right.
Okay. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, let's do a quick time check. It is 3:19. I have a hard stop at 4. And we do have several items to push through here. Are we ready to take up the new policy motion?
I believe we
between?
may be.
I believe we're there. I did just integrate the other thing too, so.
Did you see my comment about
Yes.
all, Rob?
Yes, that was to defining who's an eligible provider. I just changed that, so.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let me share the screen. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Was there any other change that you made?
The only other change was instead of, we have now cost projected by a VCBB adopted third-party model. So it's derived from a third party.
That is just playing with words. It's a VCBB model. I
have no objection. I was just integrating from other staff, so.
I can't.
Let me share the screen. Okay, let me share the screen here. And we can make that change. And just. Is everybody seeing this on their screen?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to delete the adopted third party. We did base it off of Vernonburg with some additional changes that were made, but for the sake of this, VCB model, because we did make changes. The only other changes we made to this is first in 3A, we removed that confusing language and we moved it down to create another number, a new number 4 that talks about if a provider is using it to match a federal program that doesn't require meeting to all the addresses. If say a provider is applying to serve 1,000 out of 10,000 addresses, they shouldn't get 25% of the cost for the entire universal service plan. They should get 25% of the cost to serve that subset. So that's where we made that clarified there.
This is bad. This is now badly drafted. So let's clean it up. Okay. First of all, for everyone's edification, we could, in number 2, take out VCBB all entirely, just projected by a model. So that's the question. But I would, I don't know if that is that important, but it could just say by a model. And then when we come down to the complicated section 3, note that we've deleted that 25% reference, and Rob's right that we've tried to make it a section 4, but let's look at this section 4 carefully. If a provider chooses to seek funds to match a federal program that will only construct or support, but not complete, the Universal Service Plan, the award, meaning the matching award, you should maybe say, will only equal up to an amount This is where, Rob, I don't know what I had drafted, but I don't think it's this. Will only, the matching award will only equal up to which you just say up to the construction cost, the percentage of the construction cost of the, this is, yeah, this
Something
is.
got weird there, yeah, at the end when we
I'm
went back and
going
forth.
to go back to what I sent you.
Construction. I think it may have just ended at construction cost.
I'm not sure that it did. So I can try to put it in the chat.
Of those construction cost of those addresses that are part of the federal award.
Here, I'm sending it to you in the chat.
In the chat.
I think so. I can't do chat in the meeting.
Chat's not active for the general meeting.
Turn it on for 1 second.
Could someone Jenny,
Right.
can you do that? Because I'm just.
Can we move on?
Yes.
Another agenda item so that we can.
I'll send this information. We'll get it straight.
All right.
Get it.
Let's move
Thank
on.
you.
Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, update an ARPA SRF obligation.
Sure.
Okay, Rob, you're gonna take that.
Sure. This will be quick. As I said, we did send out a letter regarding the match program, as well as asking for letters of intent to the previous grantees to use their ARPA allocations. We have received letters back from all of the CUDs, as well as our other Act 71 grantee, WCVT, that they do intend to submit applications for the remaining, for all or some of the remaining funds. There will be several applications that will likely be ready for August. We did have one request to allow it to go a little bit later into the fall, which I think it's appropriate to give that now that we have the letters of intent. What this means is if the board approves these applications coming in, and if everybody asks for the full amount of funds, we will have remaining, let me find the exact number here again. I apologize, unless you have that 2.6 million is the amount of ARPA funds we will have remaining. These are all ARPA funds. We can say very confidently with 100% confidence that all ARPA SFR funds are obligated. So there is no rush to get those obligated before the end of the year. The only rush is to provide some certainty to the availability of additional funds. So that's all I have right now, but happy to answer questions.
So Rob, when you say we'll have 2.6 remaining,
yes,
that's 2.6 million that we need to do something with. Is that right?
Yes, that we have the ability to do something with. Yes, that's after the admin, that's after all the allocations are paid out. That number could go up if the board chooses not to accept a grant application, or if in the case of one CUD, some of that money they're holding on to hold for accountability purposes. So it could change to somewhat, but we do know that there are grant requests coming in from other CUDs and amendments from other CUDs and WCVT.
So will staff have an action suggestion of what to do with the 2.6 million for the board to consider?
Yes, we plan over the next few weeks to meet with the various CUDs and to come back in August with a list of potential priorities of how that money should be expended.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Rob? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Rob. That's very helpful. Let's now move on to board process update. Parking lot.
Yep, Ginny is going to take this one. Go ahead, Ginny.
Hi, I'm just sharing my screen. Maybe. There we go.
Yep, you got it.
See that? Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to be taking just a minute to talk about the parking lot and status and let's see. So my function is to collect, organize, and monitor the status of staff assignments. As I see it, there are 3 types of assignments. These include parking lot items these are items that are specifically requested from the chair to the executive director be placed in the parking lot. There are action items that are specific tasks that the board members request of staff during board meetings. And then there are staff assignments that are generated during collaborative team meetings, or are specific tasks from the executive director. So these are the tasks that I'm trying to stay on top of. My goal is to support the board in receiving the requested information efficiently and accurately, and to support the staff in meeting the board's expectations. I'm also working to organize all of the documentation, so should there be a public records request, it's easily accessible. To simplify this process, my recommendation to the board is that the board give me the authority to pull all of the action items and place them into the parking lot. This will just allow a central location for all of the necessary tasks, and just to ensure that nothing is missed. As you know, this is a huge project, but one that's very important. My approach is just to prioritize tasks newest to oldest, adding in time-sensitive matters as necessary and appropriate. And then I'm going to be using Microsoft Planner to create tasks for the staff, setting due dates, and then following up before board meetings, so I'm able to accurately report to the board on the progress of those tasks. As you can see on the left, these items were on today's agenda and have been addressed. Excuse me, did I just say on the left? And then on the right are parking lot items that the staff is currently working on and we're tentatively going to report on in the August meeting. These are just some of the action items from the June meeting. As you can see, there are several. The next slide does show some action items that have already been completed. All of the items that you speak to in meetings or questions that are raised are very important and should have the time and attention necessary for them to be addressed. It's very important that they're addressed to me, and I'm concerned that some things may be missed. So that's why I'm hoping that you'll consider allowing me to add all of these action items to the parking lot. These are some of the completed items from the June meeting. And then, of course, if you have any questions or if there are any items that you specifically need to be raised to a higher level of priority, certainly reach out to me, either phone or email.
Thank you, Jenny. That's very helpful. I'm just going to jump in and say, I thought all action items that the board comes up with during meetings were to be on the parking lot. So I wasn't differentiating between parking lot and a separate list of action items. I think they should all belong in the parking lot. So I completely support that move to do that.
Or I think the ones that I've added to the parking lot were items that were specifically spoken, please add this to the parking lot. This is a parking lot item. Other items, I think staff is working to address.
But just to keep track of them, the best thing to do is put them on that laundry list. So let's make that the practice. And rather than have it being directed by the chair to Christine or staff to put them on the parking lot, any board member can put something in the parking lot. That should not just be the chair.
Okay.
Anybody else? Holly?
So always love people who want to keep us organized. So thank you for that. I am a little confused about how this will appear. I saw that, there's the list of open items and then completed items, but I don't understand how they cross-locate and whether they're searchable. Will the completed items show what the resolution or when the resolution occurred? And is it like we search one list for open items and another list for completed items? How are we seeing these?
These are all questions I've been asking myself, so thank you. I think for the time being, we'll continue to use the parking lot just as it is. And I've been writing notes on the far right column that says completed, the date, or next steps. The items on the parking lot, Christine, maybe you can answer this for me. The ones that are in blue, they appear to be mostly completed items, so we can continue that practice if that makes sense. But all of the items should be on the parking lot so you can find them all. They're all
Yeah,
searchable.
and they do
and they're
have
all public
resolution.
record.
And they do
Yes.
have included.
Yeah.
So it'll
that
be,
answer your
I think what we're saying is it'll be one searchable document.
Right.
I noted there was quite a number of to-dos in the latest minutes.
Yep.
So thank you for capturing those. And I would also say that I don't think we fully articulated that Tony needs to come up for a parking lot item that encompasses requirements for merger and put that together as a standard set of things that have to happen at a merger. So you could check for me, Jenny, to see if requirements for merger is on your parking lot. Thank you.
Will do.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you very much, Jenny. Well done. Let's now push on to Vikuda update, and then we'll do public comment, and then we will come back and do the piece that Holly and Rob are working on.
Great, thank you. Can you all hear me? Someone nod or
Yes.
something. Great, thanks,
Yep.
Christine. So just a couple things. One, I think we appreciate the robust discussion at the start of the meeting regarding affordability. I wanted to highlight just a couple of things again that are on our minds every time this conversation comes up. And those generally deal with the fact that we continue to not really have a full definition of what we're talking about when we say affordability, and which part of it we're talking about. And so, I would just comment again that in Vermont, the CUD's charge is to reach the unserved and underserved addresses. In many other states, when we do a comparison to their programs, we're talking about line extension programs where the state broadband office is funding a large incumbent provider to serve a few addresses. And in Vermont, we chose a different path. We chose to create entities who are receiving grant funds to go to what you could describe as the most expensive and hardest to serve addresses, and to do that very well. And so that does impact the business models and does make us a little different than the other states when we're talking about some of the other models that are out there. It's also true that some of the inputs to the system of affordability writ broadly at the biggest, highest level definition are not at this table. For instance, who is eligible is something that the federal program in ACP provided to the system that the CUDs do not have access to. We need those social service providers and other sources of data throughout state government and elsewhere to help us put a program together. So I would just, again, comment that I thought Holly's comment about this, that one CUD is not like another and one provider is not like another, is absolutely right on. This is going to be hard, and I think it's going to be something that requires exactly the kind of working group of stakeholders beyond those at this table that we would like to work with you on. And so we're looking forward to that and continue to think that's a good thing to do. The second thing was regarding the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program. And remember, this is the $1+ billion program that a certain number of nonprofit, government, and other entities around the country, but not broadband offices, are going to be eligible to apply for. The timeline on that was set when Nevada received its funding allocation for their capacity grant program, and we should see a NOFO on that program within a month now. And that's a little sooner than any of us, I was surprised by it, a little sooner than any of us thought. And, you know, as that NOFO comes out, we think that we've started the process in Vermont of bringing together, as Krista said earlier in the call, academics, regional service providers, economic development folks, training, and a bunch of other medical healthcare related parties to think about what a grant might look like. VCUDA's role in that probably diminishes after convening the stakeholders. And so we are working with those stakeholders now that they're convened to kind of figure out what the next set of activities will be for that group as the NOFO probably posts within a month and we start to understand exactly what's eligible and what the process and timeline for application will be. And so I think that's it's ahead of well, it's in a good spot in that at least the stakeholders have been convened. But there's a lot of work to do in terms of deciding what a program might actually look like and what an application might look like. I think the last update I had for today was just that the evidentiary portion of the CCI docket related to the sale of Consolidated and privatization of Consolidated is tomorrow. The CDs will be available to testify and to take questions and be cross-examined on kind of our key points. And again, most of those points are about providing to the state government the information it needs to understand what portion of the new holding company's investment will be made in Vermont. They've made a commitment of a very large investment across all of their states. And, you know, we don't believe that as competitors, it would be appropriate for them to tell us what's going to be invested. But we do think it's important for you to know and for the PUC to know where the investment's going to be and what magnitude as you do your planning. And then the second thing we've asked for in that process is as the volume of activity increases in Vermont into the future, that some of the challenges we've had in Make Ready and preparing polls for broadband deployment are part of the investment strategy for the state. So we're looking forward to making those points in the cross-examination of Ellie tomorrow, who will be testifying, and you know, look forward to continuing to be part of that discussion about how to make sure those investments benefit all of Vermont. So I think those are my comments for today, unless there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate it. Anybody have comments, questions for Rob? All right, hearing none, thank you. And let's move on to public comment.
Okay, public comment session. Raise your hand and you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Anybody have any comments to make? Rob's got his hand. Rob Bitskay, you got your hand up.
And this is because we're not allowed to make lead comments during VCUDA. And so I'm doing it in public comments as requested. Just a comment about the timeline slides that were presented earlier. It feels pretty aggressive between the date of releasing the RFP and submitting an application to have 1 month. And so, you know, we'll obviously we don't know what's in the RFP, and we're in the same boat as every other provider. But that feels pretty aggressive. It also felt pretty aggressive that the staff would be able to evaluate, score, make a recommendation, and complete a final proposal to the NTIA in a similar amount of time at the end of the year. And so I would just ask that in future presentations, if you could talk about what the process will be to ask for an extension and what the ramifications would be of extending the timeline on the final selection. We'd love to hear about that, and we understand you need to do that in public forum. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Krista.
Hi. So I just wanted to follow up on the discussion that was had around the affordability and just make the distinction, because I don't think it was called out in the presentation, but 808-4A-6F, which is the discretionary authority to develop policies or recommend to the General Assembly programs that promote access to affordable broadband service plans. And I just want to make sure we talk about the difference between developing a policy or recommending to the General Assembly a program. And that distinction between what a program is and what a policy is, I think is really important and important to the language written into the statute. So as we think about what a policy might look like, or if a policy comes into existence, the degree to which it creates programmatic requirements, I think that is the degree to which it belongs in a recommendation to the General Assembly. Thanks very much.
Yep, thank you. Any other comments? Oh, Lisa Birmingham, go ahead.
Hi, yep, just to follow on what Chris was talking about, I just wanted to ask what the next steps are for the affordability discussion and policy. It's not clear to me, and we're of course willing to submit additional written comments or analysis. I heard other folks offer theirs, and then just if there is no other opportunity, I'll just point out at slide 20, the 8086B6 citation, which is prioritizing construction grants that provide affordable service options, is just that. That's the board is supposed to prioritize applications that offer that. Turning it on its head by saying everyone has to offer that is, I think, a bit problematic. But anyway, we can get into that later. But thank you.
Patty, may I respond to Lisa's question about process?
Yes.
So everyone has been heard several times, and yet we have a draft that is of great concern to many. So I had a meeting as the chair of that committee with Tony and with Ellie to hear about some baseline concerns. We made revisions to the policy and it's shrinking like crazy. But before we take any further steps, Tony and I will have a brief meeting with Patty to let her know where we're at that with that policy. And then we will release it for comment. Have I got that right, Tony?
Yeah.
Okay. And so there will be an opportunity for comment, and the good Lord and the board willing, we will complete this exercise in the August meeting.
Great. Any other comments?
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Holly. That was
move on.
well
Yep.
summarized.
Okay, Patty, we can move on.
All right. You have on our agenda confirming the next meeting date of August 12th. Can all board members attend? All board members present?
Yes.
Yes. Laura, you're available? Great. So at least 4 of us will be there. All right, we still have the KPI scorecard to go over, but I think that's gonna chew up some time. I want to come back now to the piece of work that Holly and Rob are working on. Are we ready for prime time?
It might just be. Rob, what do you say? Tony, Tony, I'm seeing the last email from you.
Yeah, I just sent something.
Okay. So how should we proceed on this? Could you fix the typos that are in your draft, Tony? Can you see there's a word?
Sorry, I ended up dropping there, but
Tony, could you fix that typo in number 2?
Yes, I just,
Here,
yes, I have to pull it in a different document. Yeah.
okay, I can do it right in
Thank you.
right in what we're working. So where's the typo that ended up in number 2 here?
It's
Sorry, I missed some of that
unfunded
right
and
there.
eligible. Unfunded and eligible are run together in number 2.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, They don't on the screen right now that I'm looking at, but
I'm
Right,
looking in the email. Okay.
Yeah,
oh,
I
I can't show the email. I only can show what we've been working on. I can't show something else that was pulled up via email right now.
Okay, so Laura, oh God. So Tony, would you please check this? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Would you please check this to make sure any changes you made are reflected?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do because we didn't have a markup, so I was trying to do it in Word so that we could track changes to see what has changed.
Yeah.
Well,
So
what we had approved, well, we had gone through most of the items except for 4. That was the big issue. The one request I had from programmatic staff, and I'm fine going either way, is in 2 where we said VCBB model, see if statistical estimation model is acceptable. I'm fine with whatever, but
well, so legally, what I was trying to say is that there's only one model. That's why I called it the VCBB model.
okay.
But I mean, I don't know that statistical estimation model as a modifier is all that useful, but you could say a standard model so that people don't come forward with their own models.
Yes. Standard model. I think that would be speak now if anybody else on
Or
staff.
an objective model, a documented
How about
objective model.
standard objective model? How about that?
Fine.
Okay. And then the changes that we had from then is there was some extra language that got copied over in 3B that was removed.
So.
And then there's number 4, which I hope I got everything with the markup of it's cutting and pasting creates some problems, but I think we have it.
So Rob, can I correct some errors here?
Please, oh, please do. As I said, this is editing in real time is a challenge. So go on.
Okay, so 3A is fine. 3B, that I would like you to, I think it's certified that each such eligible provider.
Okay.
Okay. And then let's look at 4 together, unless somebody's got.
Yeah, I'm still on 3A because I was proposing that we just say that we're supporting the completion of construction to eligible addresses without getting into whether they're all eligible addresses since the universe, because of that whole on-grid, off-grid issue.
This is a eligible addresses are defined here by Act 71.
Yeah, and unfunded is important.
Yes,
Be
it
clear.
should say
So
shouldn't it say construction of all unfunded eligible addresses? Or just I guess it's never mind. Never mind. I take it back. I take it back.
Yeah.
I take it back.
Construction
I take
as
it back.
such unfunded. I think it's good.
Rob, never mind. Tony, are you okay?
I'm
remember
not sure why we need all. I just don't like all eligible addresses.
Because that's the statutory requirement under Act 71, that you have a universal service plan for all eligible addresses.
On
Are
grid.
we talking about the same action, the same number here?
Yes, we are, Rob.
Okay,
Rob,
so you wanted to add in all?
Rob, can you calm down for 1 second? I want to hear what Tony says. So
the universal service plans are only for on-grid addresses.
Yes, but that's what we're talking about under this criterion, which qualifies who could be eligible for this award.
Okay.
Not which addresses. It's about the who.
Okay.
Awards are given to eligible providers that each demonstrate that it has or commits to apply for federal funding for construction to complete this, because I'm not counting. I mean, the federal award could go beyond those eligible addresses under Act 71, but this is a commitment to ensure that they're completing their eligible addresses under Act 71.
Right. But
If-
as you know, yeah, I mean, I think you understand why I raised the issue.
I
because we were
understand,
talking about
but
the
this,
model and what was
this is,
eligible and back and forth, yeah.
but this is talking about who gets match.
Yeah, with respect to who, defining it, who, it's fine.
Right, okay? And then number 4, if a provider chooses to seek funds to match a federal program that will only construct or support but not complete the universal service plan, the award will only equal up to an amount equal to the percentage of unfunded eligible addresses for which the eligible provider will commit to apply for the federal funding, up to 25%. There's a few two equals in this, but
That's very confusing.
Yeah.
yes, it is.
Can we simplify?
The award will, not will only, the award, I had taken it out as a universal service plan. The award will equal up to the percentage of unfunded eligible addresses for which the eligible provider will commit to apply for federal funding.
Okay. For construction. So just take out the up to 25% at the end. Take out that.
Well, it's, yeah, it will never happen that it exceeds, because it says in number 2, grant awards are up to 25%.
Right.
Can people process this? Maybe, maybe not. I note that universal service plan is capitalized in the opening paragraph because it is a defined term. Rob, when you get around to it, it'd be really good if you did that, because it's a very specific thing we're talking about.
Yeah, so Alyssa just pointed out, and I think she has good reason to feel a little reticent about just of using the eligible addresses, and because every program has its own set of requirements as to what's eligible. So
but
if we refer to the on and eligible on and underserved addresses, would that work, Alyssa?
Yeah, the remaining unserved and underserved addresses in approved universal service plans.
That's perfect. I think that's perfect.
What number?
That's in 4, right?
Well,
okay, the remaining.
multiple in 2 as well.
It's in 2.
And 3A.
Unfunded eligible addresses, you want to include unfunded eligible addresses and what?
Unfunded un and underserved.
Isn't that
instead
repetitive?
of eligible?
Instead of eligible, because eligible
Okay.
is going to change per program.
Unfunded, served, and unserved. I mean, unserved and
Yes.
underserved
That's right.
and unserved. And do we have a problem with the federal definition being different now? The why don't I just say unfunded, federally determined?
Oh, no, please, Rob, stop.
Okay. Because I don't know how we're going to craft where.
All right, I'm gonna jump in here. Can I make a request that Holly, Tony, and Rob continue to work on this and not rush it? Get the wording right that you want to put forward, and then we take this up at the special meeting to be held in July.
Yes, please. And I would really like to say that it is very standard and good practice for staff to come to the board with proposed motions that would like the board to make. And this is a perfect instance where a lot of the detail is coming from staff, and it doesn't have to be a free-for-all that everybody gets all their words in. But I think Tony can protect us from more than we need. But that would have been the best practice here. Thank you.
Okay, all right. It is 3:57. I have a hard stop, 3:58 at 4. So we are gonna close this meeting down. There will be no executive session for the board to debrief because I simply don't have time.
May I suggest that we give our KPI scorecard update under a confidential cover and we'll send it out to the board. So that we'll just email that. Yeah.
Yeah, but Christine, we'll take that up in August.
Okay. All right.
Because the
no problem.
scorecard is a very important issue for many of the board members.
Okay.
And we want to spend some appropriate time on that.
All right.
And we're scheduling one more meeting for July for.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Great. So as soon as that poll comes out for meeting dates, let's jump on it so we can get the meeting set up pronto.
Great.
All right, motion to adjourn. I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Hi,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye, everybody. We're
Bye.
adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.